Got to bring in Fox NBA analyst Slick Ric Bucher, and we'll let you get started on this. Do you agree with LeBron that his Lakers title was one of the hardest in NBA history?
He's trolling us at this point, right? He has to be trolling us at this point.
Yes.
No, I don't agree with it. First of all, LeBron doesn't have a frame of reference to make that statement. Yes, it might have been the hardest one that he's ever had, but was it harder than when the Celtics and the Lakers were going back and forth across the country and flying commercial? Was it harder than the Rockets, the six-seeded Rockets who never had home court advantage? Was it harder than the Rockets beating the Knicks in that 94 meat grinder in which we had the O.J. Simpson chase going on? I don't know how many examples I could give, but ultimately, no, he has no frame of reference to say this is one of the hardest or the hardest in NBA history. He went 4-1 the first three series, and then he played a Heat team in the finals that did not have its point guard Goran Dragic for just about the entire series and didn't have its best defender in Bam Adebayo for a number of games and was never quite the same. So this idea, harder than Magic at 20 years old, closing a game 6 without Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I mean, the number of examples that I could give of series, and it's not to say that this wasn't hard, but to say it was the hardest, you'd have to be able to take all those other championship runs and find some level of comparison. He can't do that. We can't do that. That's why we've never done it. And he says it so matter-of-factly, without question. By the way, this was, the two hardest
you
ever.
Don't understand this.
Come on.
Slick, here's the issue. Marcellus always uses this quote, and I hate it, but for the first time in life, I've understood it.
Oh.
Slick, you are too far in the forest to see the trees.
Ah, damn it.
Slick, all these examples you're giving me, Slick, are isolated individual incidents. Magic having to play the 5 because Kareem was out. Isolated individual difficulty for maybe one individual. But what LeBron James is talking about, which does make this the hardest chip to win, is the fact of you're dealing with 3 things, maybe 4 that are unisolated. You're dealing with social unrest in the middle of the bubble atmosphere. You're dealing with a global pandemic. You're dealing with being sequestered from your family. I'm talking about 3 large-scale, non-isolated incidents. You talk about LeBron James doesn't necessarily have the qualifications, if you will, to speak on the largest sample size. Well, I would submit that someone who's been to, 9 NBA Finals in 10 years, if anyone in the history of the NBA is qualified to speak on this manner, I would argue that LeBron James is one of 3 to 5 people that are qualified to speak on the difficulty of winning championships, because LeBron James would know, knowing that he's lost more championships than he's won, just how difficult it is to win a championship. But I also would submit, Slick, that we can't downplay being sequestered from family when we see what Daniel House Jr. had to go through, sneaking people in the middle of COVID, even though he shouldn't have been doing that for several reasons. So while championships are usually difficult, Slick, because of the physical component, while championships at times are added difficulty because of the emotional component, now you have the racial component, the emotional component on 10, the physical component, the psychological component, and LeBron James dealt with and trumped all of those things in the middle of a pandemic. Come on, Slick. Come on, Slick.
He did, and if he wanted to say this was the hardest championship I've ever won,
yes,
I'd be 100% there with him, but that's not what he said. He said it was the hardest in history. Meanwhile, I got Damian Lillard telling me that this was the easiest for him because there was no travel, because there was focus, because he got treatment right away. It's the level of self-absorption here that is extraordinary for me. Because it might have been the hardest for LeBron James, it is therefore the hardest thing that anybody has ever done.
Slick, let me ask you this, Slick, really quickly. Let me ask you this.
Yes.
Do you think that LeBron James 2016 overcoming the deficit of 3-1 versus the best team, one of the best teams ever assembled, do you think that is a top 2, top 3 most difficult finals to win?
Hell no. Hell no. because it wasn't a 73-win team that he faced in the finals. Steph Curry was hurt. Andrew Bogut was ultimately out. Draymond Green missed. They weren't the 73-win team when he faced them. So no, that doesn't get there either. Historically.
Slick, save me some of them ribs, because you know I'm over here saying this is a damn asterisk. Look, I don't even want to get into it, because I'm going to sound like an echo chamber of Slick Rick. You made some eloquent points right there. Let me just shoot a little rapid fire right here. Why do I know that it was easy in the bubble? Because the same reason why every team sends its players away for training camp so they can focus more and get optimal results is because they know we are better in those conditions, the same conditions as the bubble. Why do I know that the bubble was easy? Because a team that couldn't win a game in the regular season finds itself in the bubble, as the Phoenix Suns did, and couldn't lose a game in the damn bubble. You want to know why I know this wasn't the hardest championship in history? Because you're talking about social, racial unrest. How about winning some championships in the 50s and 60s like Bill Russell had to do? You talk about social unrest. How about the fact that he's not basing it on competition.
When the game was hardly integrated.
He's not talking about competition.
Winning in the 50s
He's
and
talking
60s.
about circumstances. Boy, stop.
When you couldn't even necessarily play basketball, when it was a colors only hoop.
What?
Come on, Marcellus.
I'm talking about Bill Russell on the squad.
You're not even making no sense.
Yeah, I'm making sense. Acho, is there a difference between going grocery shopping or Instacart? Hey, they just Instacarted a championship right in the bubble. They didn't even have to go anywhere. They didn't have to work for it. It all came to them. Boy, stop.